Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the New York Yankees. Free agency begins today, and the Yankees have a couple pretty significant holes to fill. We need a starting center fielder. We need at least one more left-handed arm for the bullpen. And quite honestly, although I do like our starting rotation of Cole, Rodon, Severino, Cortez, and Schmidt, we don't really have an arm in the bullpen that has the stamina and the arsenal of pitches to fill in capably whenever one of those pitchers inevitably suffers an injury next season. So trying to pick up someone who we can use as a middle or long reliever who could also be a spot starter for us and fill in the rotation for a few weeks or even a month or two next year is another goal that we have for this offseason. And you can see our total money available is not that great right now. Part of it is because we have started to pay out some less than optimal coaches to improve our coaching staff. So we've started to make some offers there, and we have fired some coaches who were just not that good. And another part of the reason that we don't have tons of money available is that we have made one offer. And it could be an interesting one for us. Center fielder Cody Bellinger. If we look at the top center fielders on the market, the guy on our team, Harrison Bader, who we didn't think was worth over $10 million a year, is listed as the top free agent center fielder. But Cody Bellinger is not as good defensively, but potentially a better offensive player. And he's only looking for $4.4 million a year for 1 year. As you can see, we've offered him $13 million over 3 years with a team option in the third season. Try to maybe get him to a contract that becomes a really nice deal for the Yankees. Cody Bellinger is not what many of us thought he was going to be 5-6 years ago. And he's also certainly not the player who was a cheat code of sorts in OOTP 22. But he still has really good range, a good error rating, a pretty strong arm, and slightly above average home run power and eye. Quite honestly, if we're able to get him for $4.5 million a year or so for the next several years, I think it could be a nice addition to our team. Again, his glove is not quite at the Bader level, but it's not that far behind, and I think his bat is a little better. And the cost of him, if we're able to get him for less than half the price of Harrison Bader, I think would be a great move for us. So we have made an offer to Bellinger here already on the first day of free agency. And we've also made a couple of trade offers. Didn't really love the options available as far as left-handed relievers. You can see the highest rated left-hander out there is Clayton Kershaw. Would certainly be nice to add, even at his advanced age, but $19 million isn't going to fit into our budget. So we've made an offer for Joe Mantiply, who I think could be an interesting left-handed reliever for us. Hopefully we'll hear back from that. And then in our effort to locate somebody who could potentially be a starter for us, we've made a deal or made an offer for Nabil Krismat, who I think could be kind of a spot starter for us. Don't know if either of those deals will come through, but we'll find out in the coming days. And we've started to hear back from our coaches. Also, it looks like we're almost on the 2 trade offers that we've made. Tigers have offered third baseman Nick Maton to us. Could be a interesting utility infielder. Honestly, Davy Garcia is someone we may be looking to move on from. I just don't love the low control. I know I was just talking about needing a guy who could be a spot starter for us, and certainly with a 45 stamina and a 4-pitch arsenal, Debbie Garcia could certainly fill the bill on that front, but the average movement and below average control I don't love. So that's actually a deal that I'll take a deeper look at. But more importantly, seeing what we're doing with San Diego, I had offered them Ron Marinaccio, right-handed reliever, minor leaguer Angel Benitez, who does have some potential, but is recovering from Tommy John surgery, for Joe Mantiply, as I said. And it looks like they want a pretty good prospect in return. They're not getting Volpe. They're not getting Austin Wells. I don't think we should give them Luis Serna. The question is 25-year-old Blas Castaño. Another guy who could kind of fill that role down the line for a spot starter for us. That said, below average stuff and below average movement, not necessarily a recipe for success. And he's already a 25-year-old. So I don't know that we let that hold up the deal. Marinaccio is still making the major league minimum. He was okay this year, 4.46 ERA over 70 and 2/3 innings. Walked a lot of batters, but did strike out a lot of batters. Pretty good stuff. Don't love the lack of control. Mantiply, as I said, we really need a lefty, making $1.1 million, still going to be arbitration eligible next year. And I don't love the left-handed options that are on the free agent market. Don't love that Mantiply doesn't throw incredibly hard, but he was an all-star back in 2022, first time of his career. And he followed that up this past season with decent performance in a very small sample size in the majors in Arizona and San Diego. I feel like we're giving up a lot for him, but I can make this more obvious to you when I, excuse me, go back to the search I did before of free agent left-handed pitchers, and there's just not a lot out there. It's pretty rough, quite honestly. And the free agents are all looking for more money, and in some cases significantly more money than what Mantiply would cost. So I think I am going to go ahead and include Castaño in this trade and get it done. You know, Benitez is a guy who could become a pretty decent pitcher down the line, so this is not a costless deal for the Yankees, but still another guy who best case scenario is going to be below average movement and control, coming off of a pretty serious injury. I just don't know exactly what he's going to look like on the other side. And we need a lefty, so if we have to give up a decent righty out of our bullpen to do it, I think it's the way to go. So we're going to add Castaño to the trade, and we are not going to mess around. We're just going to go ahead and complete the trade and get the second left-handed reliever for our bullpen, who will join Jalen Beeks out there. And the other offer, also with San Diego, as I mentioned, was for Nabil Crismatt. I think he could be a pretty interesting arm out of the bullpen. Last year, he pitched 18 games in the majors, 10 of them as a starter, and had a 7.46 ERA, so was ugly. But the year before that, he played 50 games, only started one, and had a 2.94 ERA. The year before that, 45 games all out of the pen, had a 3.76 ERA. His Sierras actually have been pretty consistent through the years. So he's not an optimal guy to be a fifth starter for us. The hope would be, as I've talked about, that it's only if we needed injuries. My concern with him is that we're giving up a lot more. We're giving up Devi Garcia, who we've talked about is wanted in another trade, and Luis Gil. And both of these guys could start for us. I just hate Gil's awful control. He's never going to pitch for me unless I have absolutely no other option. And Garcia is a little tougher to potentially let go because he could kind of ultimately be a guy that we, although he's out of option years, so it's going to be hard to ensure that we can keep him in the minors at this point. But he would be a guy who could fill that fifth starter role a little better. We also have to give up catcher Mickey Gasper, 28-year-old, not very good defensively. That's fine. And then 24-year-old Andres Chaparro, who looks like he could be a major leaguer, but he's 24 years old and just finally got to AAA this past year. But definitely a guy who can hit a few balls out of the park. So I feel like we already offered them a decent amount. And as you can see, they want more to get the deal done. So I'm a little less willing to do this deal, especially because I do want to give a little thought to what the Tigers have offered us as well. And I'm not going to lie, Nick Maton is a little intriguing to me because right now we've got Rizzo at first, Volpe at second, Peraza at short, and then third baseman is probably a platoon with the youngsters Sweeney and Cabrera right now, as we've moved on from Josh Donaldson. So we kind of need another infielder, and having another infielder who could potentially be in the mix to start at third base would not be the worst thing in the world. He's not a horrible hitter against right-handers. So he could fill a need for us, and if you look at these ratings, he could play second in a pinch. He could play almost any outfield position in a pinch. We'd have to spend some time working on those things in spring training, but he would not be the worst utility guy in the world. My only concern right now is that, as I'm thinking through Devi Garcia, if we can get him through waivers and down to AAA, I guess he's already technically in AAA, but he's not the worst option to have as an insurance policy for a fifth starter when we have some injuries. And Jose Panacual, it's a decent pitching prospect. I don't love getting rid of him, but similarly, he has pretty low control. I think I'm going to discuss this with the Tigers, but I think I'm going to come back to them and remove Devi Garcia from the deal and add in Luis Gil instead. And if they will go for that, then we're going to do it. And you can see my trading reputation has just been trashed at this point. And I've never said, yes, I'll do a trade and then reneged on it. So I don't really understand. Maybe I'm just sending out offers to people that are insulting to them, but I haven't really gotten that feedback. Most of the time I get a almost. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how this trading reputation works. I don't feel like I've been weaselly or deceitful, but clearly I'm doing something that the game thinks the other general managers don't like. But I'm going to offer Gil and Panacual to the Tigers for Maton and see what they think of that counteroffer. And it looks like we're close with Detroit. Not going to offer in Devi Garcia also, but we'll see if there's anyone on this list here that we wouldn't mind parting with. And they'll take Dory Arias in the deal, who is a left fielder who's really not really much of a hitter. Just don't see him ever having a big role at the major league level. And as I talked about, I think Matan, for a relatively inexpensive utility player, gives us another left-handed bat which we can use. Isn't the worst guy to bring in, and we're not really giving anybody I love away, because although Heel has got incredible stuff, that lack of control means he's a guy that I'm just never going to want to have pitching for me if at all possible. So we're going to add Dory Arias in, and we're going to go ahead and complete that trade, and may have filled another hole on our team bringing on Nick Matan. Obviously, the biggest hole remains center field, and would love to hear some feedback from Bellinger, hopefully in the coming days. We're closing in on the winter meetings now, and we just got an interesting offer from the Rays. They would give us Manuel Margot, who they have listed as a right fielder, but certainly has the skill to play center field, has some good speed, making a fair amount of money. But they would trade him to us for 19-year-old minor leaguer Luis Serna, who's a decent prospect. Probably a fourth or fifth starter if he completely develops, but certainly a useful player. If we had Bellinger signed, I wouldn't give it a second thought, but the fact that we do have 14 days to think about it isn't the worst thing in the world, because we still haven't gotten a response from Mr. Bellinger to our offer yet. I would expect that we would in the next few days. As I mentioned, the winter meetings start in 3 days. Hopefully we'll get some feedback from Belly before then. And then we got the Rule 5 draft after that. Might be able to pick up another left-handed reliever, maybe even a spot starter kind of guy in the Rule 5. And we also might be able to get some competition for kind of a utility infielder and fourth or fifth outfielder type of spot in the Rule 5 draft as well. But obviously the big hope is that we hear something from Bellinger and that we hear something positive in the next week or so. All right, and with the winter meetings starting yesterday, we did finally hear from Bellinger. Says that we're in the lead. Doesn't seem like there's anyone else who's really interested, so maybe we can get that wrapped up relatively soon. Looks like the Rockies dropped out of the number 1 spot in the draft, and were passed by the Pirates in the lottery for the 2024 amateur draft. And we've made it to the Rule 5 draft. Still haven't heard anything else from Cody Bellinger as to whether he'll accept our offer or not. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to add some talent. I can't imagine we're going to find a center fielder, especially a starting center fielder in the draft, much less one that can even make an impact for us. But we'll see if maybe we can find a few gems in the rough. The Yankees typically would not be a team with the large budget they have that you would think would go trawling the Rule 5 draft looking for something useful. But we are going to provide some different types of leadership here. We've been getting some of those bad contracts off the books, and maybe we can find some young talent that can help us at the major league level. Taking a quick look at the top pitchers who are available. Little odd to see that Ron Marinaccio, who we just traded away, is available from the Padres. Guess they were more interested in some of the young prospects than they were in him. So I would consider bringing him back just for the free option on him. A couple other pitchers out there. Wes Parsons, a guy who can start, below average stuff in control. We also don't have great scouting accuracy on him since we're still relatively early in this playthrough. And then closer Alex Reyes. Oof, that control is brutal. He is not an option. But Parsons or Marinaccio are at least marginally interesting. Tevi Garcia's out there too. So Is that because we didn't? That's because we didn't protect him. That was stupid of us. How dumb can we be? I didn't notice that he was not protected, but he's a guy who we didn't really want to lose. So that was more stupidity by me. Hopefully we don't lose him. Take a look at the batters who are available. Hopefully we don't see Anthony Volpe listed. I'm sure we won't. Only one 3-star player, catcher Miguel Amaya. Pretty decent defensively. Wouldn't mind having him in the mix. I don't know that he's better than Jake Rogers, but I don't know that he's worse than Jake Rogers either. I know that he's younger than Jake Rogers. Rogers has got a little more power, but obviously neither of these players is an incredible offensive force. But think that certainly with the extra home run power of Rogers, I'd probably prefer him over Amaya on the margin. Then defensively, they're pretty similar also. Rogers is definitely better, but Amaya is younger. Wouldn't be the worst guy in the world to have as an insurance policy for injuries in spring training. We'll see what our scouting director recommends. He recommends Austin Wynns, another catcher. He is much less interesting to me with the average glove and not much home run power. I don't particularly love that recommendation. We're going to take Marinaccio back in this first round. I don't know that he's going to make the team. Obviously, we've been building the roster thinking that we wouldn't need him, which is why we traded him away for Mantiply. But if we get hit with a bunch of injuries in spring training, it's not inconceivable that he could make our bullpen. So we'll certainly bring him back, move on to the next round, and scouting director recommends that we take Harold Castro, 30-year-old center fielder. Once again, that suggestion does not really thrill me. And I think I'm just going to bring some guys into camp. Jorge Barrosa is a 22-year-old outfielder. Played in AAA last year. He hit 276, 13 homers, was decent. He's got a good personality. He's got decent range out there to play left or center. His bat isn't fully developed, doesn't have great home run power, but has a little bit of speed. He's a switch hitter. I mentioned that we could be in the market for a fifth outfielder still, and I would not mind bringing Barrosa in as a guy who's in the mix competing for that fifth outfield spot. Don't know that he's going to make the team. Here in the third round, we're not getting any recommendations. Amaya is still out there, kind of similar to what we did with Barrosa. I don't think he's going to make the team, but if Trevino or Rogers gets injured in the spring, Amaya could be a decent insurance policy, so we're going to at least draft him and bring him into camp. And then here in the fourth round, I think we're going to go back to Wes Parsons, the starting pitcher. Again, I don't think he's going to make the team, but depending on what happens, could he be kind of the long reliever, potential spot starter for us if we can't find anything better or we have a bunch of injuries? I guess there is a possibility of that. So we're going to bring Parsons on board also, at least to camp. Don't know if we're going to end up keeping any of the four players that we picked up, but we brought guys on board who could conceivably make the roster, particularly if we have a spate of injuries in spring training, which if it's a duplicate of the real New York Yankees in 2023 is a very real possibility. And you can see we were by far the most active team in the draft. The Pirates were the only other team that even took 2 players, and we ended up bringing on 4. Definitely feel like there is certainly a scenario where all of those players could make the team, or I guess any of those players could make the team. It's extremely unlikely that all of those players would make the team, but I can make a case just kind of driven by injuries, honestly, where each of the 4 certainly has a chance of being on the 26-man roster when we break camp in Florida and head back to New York. And we're still waiting to hear back from Mr. Bellinger, but we just got a really interesting offer from one of his former teams. The Dodgers would send us 26-year-old center fielder James Outman. Definitely has the ability to play a decent center field for us. Hit .233 last year with 9 homers and 330 at-bats. So not a dynamic offensive player, but quite honestly, his offensive profile is probably better than Harrison Bader and not all that different from Cody Bellinger. So it's definitely something to think about. We'd have to give up Jonathan Lasaiga, but with the fact that we just got Marinaccio back in the Rule 5 draft, we're probably a little heavy on right-handed relievers anyway. So that, and I love the fact that Johnny Lasagna throws extremely hard. Ground ball pitcher who throws in triple digits is a really interesting asset. Alfredo Garcia, minor league pitcher that we'd have to give up and sending them some cash in return. I don't love the cash aspect of it, but if Bellinger does deny us, Outman is really not a bad option. Still not even salary arbitration eligible, so he's only had 130 days on the major league roster, so he's going to be making the major league minimum this coming season and the season after that. At the very least, he could be an interesting 4th or 5th outfielder. Would love to have a second player who's pretty proficient in center field to just take Aaron Judge ever having to cover all of that territory off the table. Because we'd love to do anything we can to possibly keep Judge as healthy as possible, given that he's already fragile and we still owe him $320 million over the next 8 seasons. All right. Well, it wasn't a Christmas miracle because we had to wait a couple days later, but we did get Cody Bellinger signed. So I think that's a good deal for the Yankees. As I said, a 3-year deal, $4 million each of the first 2 years, and then a $5 million team option for the 3rd season. He will obviously slot in as our starting center fielder. Not a perfect solution by any stretch of the imagination, but it does give us another left-handed bat, which we've been a little light on. Can always use in Yankee Stadium. And it definitely gets Aaron Judge out of the business of being our regular center fielder, which is where he would have been before we got Bellinger on board. So I really like that acquisition for the Yankees. Think although Bellinger is not a superstar, definitely a competent major league center fielder defensively, and can probably provide a little bit of offense. Hit just .227 with 11 home runs last season for the Cubs, so it wasn't a great year, and definitely kind of continues the slide that his career has been on since those first 3 seasons when he looked like he was on a path to the Hall of Fame. But I think given the financial considerations that we're under with the Yankees right now, with the fact that we've got some bad contracts that we had to eat portions of to get off our books, I think Bellinger is about as good as we could have hoped to do this offseason in terms of joining us as a center fielder. Now the last remaining question is we still do need somebody else who can play center field in the event that Bellinger gets banged up or needs a day off. We obviously brought on Barossa who I talked about in the Rule 5, and he certainly could be in the mix for a fourth or fifth outfielder. I almost think now with Bellinger on board, that could be really interesting to keep the soon-to-be 23-year-old. Definitely an interesting player to have picked up in the Rule 5 draft. And then there's also, obviously, the option that was sent our way a few days ago by the Dodgers. I'd be willing to include Johnny Lasagna in a deal for him. I don't know that I'm willing to include cash. So we may send a rebuttal to them. I do just think that James Outman would be a really awesome fourth outfielder for us. You could argue that defense-wise, maybe even start him in center over Bellinger. I don't think we're quite at that level. But I think I'd give Bellinger the first crack, but certainly the numbers that he put up last year might be even a little better, honestly, kind of prorated compared to what Bellinger did. As glad as I am to have Bellinger on board, since we didn't have to give up any assets other than money for him, you can certainly argue that if all we have to give up is a surplus right-hand reliever and a minor league left-handed pitcher, and we can somehow get Outman on board, it's something to think about. I don't think the Dodgers will be impressed with this counteroffer. We swapped out Johnny Lasagna for Clayton Beeter, a 25-year-old pitching prospect, spent last year in AAA. Don't love the fact that he's got really awful control, but his stuff is impressive. The situation with the Dodgers is they're up against it financially, so that's why they were looking for cash from us. If we just gave them Lasagna straight up, we'd have to keep 60% of his salary to be able to fit that into the deal. So I don't think they're going to go for this. Certainly if we could get a potentially starting center fielder, worst case, a really diverse and somewhat talented fourth outfielder for a couple of minor leaguer pitchers that we don't care about, that would be a great deal for us. I imagine they're not going to be thrilled with the offer, but the only way we can find out is by making it. And the Dodgers said we're almost there. Definitely surprised by that. We're going to take a look at who they're actually looking for, but it looks like there's definitely players that we would be willing to give up in this deal. They're not looking for a huge prospect to make it work. I think this is a really good deal for the Yankees. I'm going to figure out what makes it the best deal possible, but I think bring in another guy who can play a good defensive center field, honestly can probably compete with Bellinger for the starting center field spot. And also, if they both end up hitting decently, it allows us to hopefully maybe move a Stanton and or Judge at time into the DH spot, which, given that they're both pretty fragile and they're both on the wrong side of 30, could be something that would hopefully help keep them healthy. And clearly, if we had Outman and Bellinger both in the outfield, our outfield defense would be better than it would be, particularly if we moved Stanton into the DH role. So I think we're going to end up trying to get something done here. Yeah, one of the guys that'll get the deal done is Brandon Lockridge, almost 27 years old, spent last year in Double-A, where he's been stalled for the last 3 years. Hit .253 there with 23 home runs, but he's almost 27 years old. His bat is clearly below average, decent defensive player. Happy to throw him in to get this deal done. So we're going to add in Brandon Lockridge and include Alfredo Garcia and Clayton Beeter. And we're going to bring James Outman on board. Definitely feel like this deal makes me, with this deal and the acquisition just a day or two ago of Cody Bellinger as a free agent, feeling a lot better about our center field. Honestly, if you look at the roster right now, we had Stanton and Judge at the corner outfielders, and we picked up Barossa in the Rule 5, Bellinger as a free agent, and now Outman in a trade. So we needed to bring some outfielders onto the potential team. We certainly still have Austin Wells, who will definitely be in the mix from AAA to be an outfielder for the Yankees next year, but we've definitely added some talent, and particularly some talent that is pretty decent at playing defense to help our outfield out. So I really like what we've been able to do so far on a relatively shoestring budget. And we've made it to January 1st, and I'm feeling cautiously optimistic about the team. As we talked about, between Bellinger and Outman, like what we've done in center field, and think that Barossa certainly has a chance at making the team. When we look at adding Amaya in the Rule 5 draft, he's got a chance at making the team. And then right now, when we go down to AAA, we've already talked about the fact that Austin Wells could make the team, but Nick Maton could definitely make the team as well. And then as far as our pitching staff, we've got Parsons as a potential starter at the back end of rotation, that we got the optionality on him from the Rule 5 draft. We made the trade for Mantiply, and obviously we got Marinaccio back in the Rule 5 draft as well. So we haven't spent a lot of money. We've still got about $6.5 million to spend, even after signing Bellinger as a free agent and making some moves with our coaching staff where we had to fire some people and pay them out. So we're in decent shape. We definitely, if we don't add any more players, can potentially improve our scouting and development budgets a little bit further, which those of you who have watched previous series of mine know I view very positively. So I think it's been an interesting offseason for the Yankees. Haven't made a huge, splashy, George Steinbrenner-esque Yankees move this offseason, but we've gotten some bad contracts largely off the books. I mean, we're still going to be on the hook for 40% of LeMahieu for the next few years, but we can live with that. And we've kind of filled the left-handed reliever role that we wanted to fill with Mantiply. We've filled the center fielder hole, hopefully more than sufficiently, bringing both Bellinger and Outman on board. So I feel like we've definitely made some progress improving this roster, and also opening up some opportunities for some of the young players on our team, particularly in the infield. So feeling good about things, but obviously there's still a lot of time till the new season starts. We'll probably spend some time taking a look at who's available on the free agent market. Are there any deals to be had now that people have been lingering out there for a month and a half or so at this point? We don't need to be looking at only lefties anymore. But you can see not a ton of talent out there already. Frankie Montas, former Yankee, injury risk, looking for over $10 million, and he's the only pitcher out there that our scout thinks is a 3-star type of guy. Looking at the batters, a little bit more on the market. Harrison Bader's demands have actually gone up, which seems like an odd negotiating tactic as he's sitting out on the free agent market, but to each his or her own. There are some, decent players and decent personalities, some guys who are pretty experienced bats, particularly as I look through this list, that might be interesting to consider bringing on board. So if prices come down, maybe we make another free agent signing. If prices don't come down over the next couple of months, we probably end up putting some of that money that's available into scouting or player development to make a little progress on those fronts. But although it's been a quiet off season, I kind of like what we've done. If you've got different opinions or the same opinions or think we should have done something completely differently, would love to hear about it in the comment section. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.